Well, good morning, ladies and gentlemen. And on behalf of the U.S. Chamber, welcome. Thank you for braving this chilly weather, for joining us for breakfast this morning. We really do appreciate your time and attention. And more importantly, we are so thrilled that you're here to join us and witness the launching of what we believe is an exceedingly important and unprecedented coalition of organizations that are both industry and geographically diverse. You know, the process to develop laws and regulations in our country was intended to be open, transparent, representative of the interests of the American public most broadly. So today, with the unveiling of the Partnership for a Better Energy Future, we're going to hold true to those principles. This broad coalition will vigorously participate in the Environmental Protection Agency's current and future regulations of greenhouse gas regulations. It is a process that is underway, but it will take years to implement, and we plan to be present at every step of the way. The EPA is advanced already in its path to regulate greenhouse gas emissions from new sources of electricity and has begun the rulemaking for all existing sources of electricity, but it doesn't stop there. As confirmed by Administrator Gina McCarthy in recent testimony, the EPA must then turn its focus to regulating other aspects of the economy and their emissions. This sweeping agenda will have a profound impact on virtually every component of our economy in every region of our country, which is why this coalition is so diverse in the interests and regions it represents. We have representatives from the mining and coal industry, the oil and gas industry, the agricultural and farming community, the manufacturing sector, consumers, transportation, home builders, small businesses. We have 78 groups in 26 states. We at the Chamber, here at the Institute for 21st Century Energy, and at NAM, the National Association of Manufacturers, we will spearhead this effort because this affects the very functioning of every element of our economy, which is still staggering from a very damaging recession. We have some of the key members with us here today. We have the National Mining Association, the Alliance for Clean Coal Electricity, the American Gas Association, the Farm Bureau, the Fertilizer Institute, Portland Cement, Portland Cement. Others that could not be with us because their travel schedules dictated otherwise, the American Petroleum Institute, although I see representatives here, the Association of Fuel and Petrochemical Manufacturers, the National Rural Electric Cooperative Associations, and the Railroad Associations. We have business organizations as part of this coalition from everywhere from Alaska to the Panhandle in Florida, California, Texas, Nebraska, North Dakota, Louisiana, Pennsylvania, Kansas, Kentucky, Michigan, Virginia, the Carolinas, Missouri, and I've neglected a few. And this is just a start. We will take advantage of every opportunity to be the real-time reality check to EPA and its rulemaking on the impact of each regulation on each and every one of these industries and regions. We do this because we want a better outcome, not because we want to throw obstacles in the process. We are united in our conviction that energy in America must be affordable, reliable, and diverse. Not only is it critical to each of the members of this coalition, but it is to the well-being of our country and economy as a whole. It is the underpinning of America's competitiveness. We also believe that we truly need all forms of energy and will rigorously fend off efforts to eliminate fossil fuels from our energy mix. The United States and the world would depend on fossil fuels for the foreseeable future, and every one of us here is a supporter of clean air, clean water, and good land in this country. The suite of greenhouse gas regulations will be a set of some of the most complex and far-reaching regulations in recent history, and we will insist that the process be transparent. We are exercising our rights for the process to be inclusive and representative. And at the end of the day, the principles that bind us are simply common sense. We do not want EPA to mandate technologies which are not available or pathways that harm our economy or destroy or dislocate American jobs. The scale and scope of EPA's rulemaking agenda is so immense and complex that we expect the process to include broad stakeholder input and thorough cost-benefit analysis. We want to shape the outcome from the very beginning to ensure a better outcome at the end. We expect the partnership to grow, We will be out in the states who ultimately must implement these regulations and help them understand the impacts locally and how to manage those expectations. I am greatly pleased to be joined by Jay Timmons, who is the leader of the National Association of Manufacturers and the co-leader of this effort, whose organization spans every state of our country and every industry of our economy. So let me turn it over to Jay for some opening remarks.
Thank you very much, Karen. Appreciate that, and appreciate the fact that you're such an outstanding spokesman for sensible energy policy. We appreciate your leadership on this issue, and we appreciate our partnership with the Chamber of Commerce on these issues and so many others. You know, the strength of this partnership here today is in our diverse membership and its unique perspective. The 78 member organizations that are represented at the table here and throughout the room come from nearly every segment of the U.S. economy, as Karen has indicated, and we're unified in support of responsible energy regulations. Now, as a coalition, we're going to be engaging with the administration to offer legal, policy, and technical expertise. We'll also engage members of Congress and urge them to pass legislation that makes clear what the EPA can and cannot do as it moves forward with greenhouse gas regulations. And we'll build a wide network of stakeholders in Washington and the states that support a true all-of-the-above energy strategy. We're committed to this cause because, put quite simply, we know what's at stake. Last week I had the opportunity to be in Houston, and I was able to witness firsthand the kind of investments that manufacturers are making there. Spurred by low-cost energy, manufacturers are investing billions in their existing facilities, they're building new ones, and they're creating jobs. And it's not just in the Gulf. Manufacturers are major energy consumers. In fact, we use 1/3 of this nation's energy output and of the energy that's consumed in the United States. So any drop in energy prices frees up resources that manufacturers use to invest and to grow and to create jobs. Shale gas development and other non-conventional energy development today support 2.1 million total jobs, and quite frankly, that number doesn't come close to the jobs potential. Many of the projects made possible by this energy development take years to come online, and by the year 2025, the jobs number will reach nearly 3.9 million. Manufacturers are also doing more with the energy that we use. We're developing technologies to advance energy efficiency. We're reducing greenhouse gas emissions. Efficient and sustainable energy practices make sense. They're good business, and they're the right thing to do. The energy revolution is absolutely a game changer, and it indeed makes us more competitive as a nation. But you know, it's not a foregone conclusion. Misguided policies can certainly get in the way. The President's Climate Regulatory Action Plan is a prime example of that. It puts the gains that manufacturers have made and will make in jeopardy. The greenhouse gas emission rules that are proposed by the EPA would limit manufacturers' ability to access affordable and secure energy. Today's rule will impact coal. Tomorrow, it'll be natural gas. The administration has signaled that it intends to regulate fossil fuels out of the economy. And then when the EPA is through with power plants, it will move on to manufacturing facilities. We've assembled such a broad array of industries in this coalition because we all know that we will be next. The EPA is taking our country down a very dangerous path. Let's be very clear about that. It's putting manufacturing competitiveness, which has been outlined as a key goal for this administration, it's putting our competitiveness and ultimately the nation's economy at risk. In the end, the EPA is not going to just be setting energy policy, it's going to be setting the nation's economic policy as well. There's no doubt that manufacturers need energy policies that embrace all forms of energy so that we can adjust to the changing markets. We can't afford to take one major source of energy off the table forever, and we can't afford to risk the incredible economic opportunities presented to us by North American energy resources. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jay. We have a number of distinguished guests up here on the dais, so I'm going to first turn to Hal Quinn at the National Mining Association. And obviously your members have a lot of concerns with what is being proposed by EPA. Can you outline for us a little bit what those concerns are and what could happen if it goes wrong, or what will happen if it goes right?
Okay. Thanks, Karen. I think you've hit on a couple of the areas as well as Jay, but our concerns lie with any policy that makes our electricity supply less diverse, less reliable, and more expensive. And as Karen mentioned, right now what we're facing are two rules. One, a rule that deals with the construction of new power plants, and it effectively bars the construction of new advanced coal power plants. Plants will need to replace the older plants that are scheduled for retirement because of age, or because ones that are retiring earlier than normally because of recent EPA rules issued 2 years ago. And then we'll face another rule on existing plants, and at that point in time, depending on what direction EPA goes, we could again affect the diversity of the supply, because at that point in time, we're going to have a large number of plants that have already retired. What's left in the coal fleet will be the largest and most efficient plants left. There's not a lot left to squeeze out in terms of efficiency and lower emissions that have already been done. And many of those plants will have had billions of dollars invested, $20 to $30 billion invested to upgrade for these recent rules issued 2 years ago. So there's a lot of potential stranded investment here as well. And I think Mike Duncan will probably explain why utilities like diversity and the flexibility it brings in terms of their power sources or their energy sources. What happens if this goes wrong? Well, clearly from our immediate self-interest, it affects our markets and employment. And today I have 30,000 fewer coal miners employed than just 18 to 20 months ago. What these policies mean is, depending on how they come out, it can increase or decrease the likelihood that many of them will ever find those high-wage jobs again back in the coal mines and in the coal supply chain. And I suspect, as well as you'll hear from other members of this panel, that if it goes wrong, it's really going to, as Jay alluded to, it's going to expose many of our industries and the reshoring of manufacturing in other industries to more volatile and longer-term higher energy costs, which affects their competitiveness. And finally, I suspect, as Karen alluded to, that there's a shared concern that what they do here on the coal rule is going to set a very bad precedent that cannot be unwound as they reach other industries. I mean, after all, if you're going to leap and say, I'm going to set a standard based on technology that's never been demonstrated at a commercial scale in the particular application they want it to be applied, how can you set a standard in the first place?
Well, how you set that up nicely for Mike Duncan, actually. And Mike, coal's the leading feedstock in the United States. It supplies about 40% of baseload electricity in our country. So what challenges do you see on the horizon for coal-powered electricity, and what's the industry doing to respond?
Jay, Karen, and my colleague Cal, thank you very much. Coal-based electricity is alive and well in America. That's the message that I want you to take away today. The recent cold weather and reliance on a true all-of-the-above strategy, it actually worked, has highlighted the importance of coal as a reliable, affordable, and more importantly, essential part of the base load that delivers electricity for us. And I'll put a human face on that in just a moment. The administration's policies toward fossil fuels, particularly coal, are the biggest challenge that we have. And I think a lot of you understand why. The all but one of the above strategy that the administration is demonstrating through their attitude and actions in new source performance standards has created a de facto ban on new power plants in this country. We've led the world in that. We've led the world in the technology. I'm old enough to remember going to Los Angeles and to Cleveland and seeing the smog. And now I go to Beijing and I see the same thing. We've changed all that in the last 40 years, and we can do more. But with this de facto ban, we're taking away the ability. We're saying, no, you can't do it unless you have carbon capture and sequestration, which is one of the tools, but it's not the only tool. And I'm very passionate about that because it takes away competitiveness for us. Someday people will be selling that technology back to us in America, and that's wrong. The standards halt innovation. But perhaps the biggest challenge that we have is the standards for existing plants that are further restricting our energy mix and reducing our global competitiveness. And it is manufacturing. It's individuals, it's small business, it's manufacturing. ACE is fighting the overreaching punitive regulations at the federal level, many of the things that were outlined, Jay, that you outlined this morning, and at the state level, because the states have an opportunity to say no under the Clean Air Act. We believe it's a state responsibility, and we're trying to educate them. You know, the president started his speech the other night saying, "Today in America," and he talked about someone turning a light switch on, and I was hopeful. I thought, maybe he's getting this. Today in America, it's a great theme. But then he got down, he didn't mention coal. He said that gas was a bridge fuel, whatever that means. I think it means that the next target on the back is gas. And he talked about tough choices. Well, let me tell you what those tough choices are. Those tough choices are the manufacturers who, when they go in, won't know that they have the reliability to have a full shift of electricity that they produce the goods and services that they sell all over this country and the rest of the world. That reliability may not be there. The small business person on the street, most of the jobs that are created are small business jobs, won't know what it's going to cost. The volatility, the inability to predict the cost, the rising cost of electricity, and what will that do to the cost of goods sold and new people. But finally, and more importantly, today in America, there was a consumer that switched on the lights and turned up the heat, and it was there, and they could afford it. Tomorrow in America, we have to ensure that that consumer, particularly the fixed income and low income consumer, can do the same. As you can tell, I'm very passionate about this, Jay.
Rightly so.
Thank you, Mike, and rightly so, as Jay said. Well, let me turn now to Dave McCurdy, who is the CEO of the American Gas Association, and gas is a bright spot in our economy today, especially on a day like today. And you represent the entire supply chain and all the way, down to the consumer. I mean, you have repeatedly said you think that this needs to be a transparent process. Talk to me a little bit about how you think this can be a reasonable process and what your concerns are.
Well, thank you, Karen, and thank you, Jay. And we're pleased to work with both the U.S. Chamber and NAM, and we do on a number of activities and involved on the really bright prospects of our economy and using affordable domestic energy in order to power it. And yes, natural gas is a bright spot right now because it's domestic, it's abundant, it's clean, it's affordable. And it really meets a lot of the goals that we share here, but even the President stated, and that's to have a viable and growing economy, and it's a big part of it. We've talked about the jobs numbers that Jay mentioned, and those are true. But it does give the U.S. a competitive economic advantage vis-a-vis other nations that we've not had in some time. And we hear about the onshoring of manufacturing chemicals and petrochemicals. Energy security is a big part of our objective and goal. We can reduce our dependence on foreign oil, and we see that in transportation in a number of areas where there's wonderful opportunities, but we may have to make sure that the policy is aligned with economic reality and technology in order to accomplish that. And we think it takes some visionary thinking because a lot of the policies, Hal and others are talking about some of the future concerns and of regulation, but quite frankly, we have laws on the books that were written before the shale revolution that are misaligned and aren't realistic, that have to be addressed as well. And we also share the goal of improving the environment, and this is where gas obviously is a clean fossil fuel, but it's also enabled us to reduce our emissions in this country and to achieve other goals. So there's a lot going for us, and we have an infrastructure of over 2.5 million miles of pipeline, 2.4 million miles. But we do believe that you need principles and common sense approach to regulation, and it has to be transparent. It has to be engaging all stakeholders. And it cannot be ideologically driven. It needs to be fact-based. And in many areas, there's not enough understanding of what all those facts are. And we're working with the administration on some areas, even environmental groups, to get measurement on greenhouse gas emissions from our distribution systems. But those numbers are actually pointing to a good news story in that they are declining. But that's based on our approach to build this system out safely, based on safety and economic considerations and public utilities as opposed to an environmental objective. And then lastly, I would just say, and I know it's shocking for folks who represent the energy sector, but it is not wise policy for any nation to put all their eggs in one basket. And we're not asking that all our energy basket be natural gas. It shouldn't be all coal. It shouldn't be just all renewables. It takes all those. And don't neglect and ignore energy efficiency. And this is an area that we can make real progress, and we're working on that as well. So it takes a pragmatic approach. And Karen and I were in a meeting with some European parliamentarians this last week, and they're so envious of where the U.S. is from an economic standpoint and also the trends from an affordability standpoint for their energy portfolio. They adopted a high energy cost strategy to meet some environmental objectives. And they thought that they might, in fact, have a competitive advantage if fossil fuels were going to continue increasing costs and have high volatility. But with the shale revolution, that's no longer the case. So we now have a stronger position. So I think it's really an alignment of public policy and economic policy that needs to be achieved here, and something that we're committed to having principles that make sense. We won't agree on every aspect, and we're certainly not in a confrontational mode, but we do think that it's important that we state those clearly.
Well, Chris John and at the Fertilizer Institute and Greg Scott at Portland Cement have a unique perspective because their major, the products that are manufactured there require major energy inputs. And so they bring a unique perspective to the partnership. Greg, Chris, can you just give us your perspective on kind of the financial impact and other concerns that you might have about the EPA's regulatory agenda? Why don't we start with Greg and over to Chris?
Sure, I'd be happy to. Thanks much, Jay. Cement is the most common building material in the United States and across the world, and it is a uniquely made-in-America manufacturing industry. Last year, over 90% of the cement used in the United States was manufactured in American cement plants. In 2013, over 14,000 workers, union and non-union, about 50% each, and 140,000 indirect employees in cement-related industries produced over 80 million tons of cement. This cement was used primarily to make concrete, which is used in bridge, runway, dam, and road construction, to pour foundations for new homes and apartment buildings, as the primary building material for commercial buildings, and by individual consumers every day to build an outdoor barbecue, make sure a lamppost or mailbox stays upright, or to construct durable driveways and walkways at their home. A Duke University study concluded that our industry has implemented energy efficiency measures over the last 2 decades that have reduced our energy consumption by over 15%. We have been studying a wide variety of greenhouse gas control technologies for the last decade. The best case carbon capture and sequestration scenario we have come up with to date for our plants would increase the cost of manufacturing cement in the United States by approximately 100%, leaving American cement manufacturers at the mercy of low-cost cement imports that would not bear the cost of these GHG controls. America's cement manufacturers support an all-of-the-above national energy strategy that encompasses energy efficiency and a diverse mix of energy sources, including coal, natural gas, oil, and alternative fuels. PCA is convinced that such an approach is the best way to preserve American manufacturing jobs, including those in the domestic cement manufacturing industry. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Greg. Chris?
Thanks, Jay. Thanks, Karen. We like to say in the fertilizer industry that this issue is only important if you like to eat food. So we come at, and our farming partners agree with that. In fact, we support over 2 million American farms in growing the food that the world needs to survive and thrive. We're concerned from two standpoints here. The first is, as Jay said before, what comes next? We're next in the crosshairs here, and what process are they going to use to mandate unproven technologies on the fertilizer industry? And secondly, as importantly, for nitrogen fertilizer to manufacture that here domestically, somewhere between 70 and 90% of that cost comes from natural gas as the feedstock. So when prices spiked in the last decade, the United States lost over 40% of its manufacturing capacity. It's a global, international, competitive marketplace, and it went to other areas where it was cheaper to manufacture. But because of the shale gas revolution, we are seeing a renaissance in the industry that we haven't seen in over 40 years. There's been 30 announced plants in North America that will create tens of thousands of high-paying jobs here in the United States. And the United States still imports approximately 50% of its nitrogen, so there's still opportunities to grow that as we go forward. So we heard the President say on Tuesday night that he wanted to see that move forward and natural gas as a bridge fuel and create more jobs, and we'd like to see us move forward in that regard, and we'd like him to prove it and come out with regulations that are common sense, that make sense, that don't distort the marketplace, that has a significant impact on our industry and our ability to support the farmers who grow the food that we eat. Just one other data point to share with you, a dollar cost increase in natural gas costs our industry somewhere between $400 and $500 million. So it's a huge impact, and so we look forward to working with you to make sure we can get some common sense in this process.
Well, thank you, Chris. And I think it was an important data point there about our competitive advantage about affordable energy. At the meeting that Dave and I were at, we had representatives from all over Europe, but in Germany in particular, electricity prices here versus Germany, they're 4 times as high in Germany as they are here, which is why the German petrochemical industry is moving to the United States. It is the reason why the fertilizer industry is coming back, the chemical industry is coming back. So we do have a comparative advantage that is spurring a manufacturing renaissance if we let it. It's also benefiting the underbelly of the American economy, which is America's farmers. This is not just centered on industry. It is the food we eat. And with a rebound in the fertilizer industry, that's good for America's farmers, right? And so I'd like to turn it over to Dale and have you give us a perspective of what this means, not just for farmers, but for rural America. If we get this right or if we don't get this right, you know, we are the breadbasket of the world and have the potential to do even more with this competitive advantage.
Thank you, Karen, and Jay. Thank you for having farmers and ranchers at the table. I look up and down the panel here, and every one of these industries provide inputs for farmers and ranchers and rural communities. Farmers and ranchers also are somewhat unique. We are energy producers as well as significant energy consumers. American Farm Bureau represents 6 million member families, and those of you who read ag census tables know that by U.S. ag census standards, there are 2 million farmers in the United States. That means we've got well over 4 million additional families that are part of our organization. They are part of the landscape. They represent the rural communities out there. And whether we're talking about energy costs to heat homes, the cement that builds those homes, and even in the biofuels, I smile, Mike, because I know at least 2 or 3 of the larger ethanol plants across the country, the fuel that provides electricity and the heat in those plants is coal. It's a little bit ironic, but it is all part of the partnership we have. When you start taking, as has been mentioned here, when you start taking one fuel off the table, take coal off the table, and everything starts shifting around, shifting to natural gas. That drives up fertilizer prices. A number of the petrochemicals, not just on the fertilizer side, but the crop protection chemicals that farmers and ranchers depend on, use petroleum as a feedstock for a number of those products. All of those things that drive up costs, and EPA's desire, we look forward to working collaboratively with them. Occasionally, I would probably have to have the inner cowboy in me tied to my chair so that I don't overhelp EPA make decisions. But when we're in an era where we've worked very hard as a nation, as a group of industries, to move our nation to an energy independent, closer to energy independence, it's almost like we almost get close to the goal line, and then laws, regulations, standards start pulling those pieces off the table, and rather than achieving independence, we start going backwards. I will tell you that in all 50 states, we have members in all 50 states and in Puerto Rico, and when we look at this complex out there, we see an opportunity, we see a desire for all of us to work with EPA, to be treated as partners in this process, to work with them on coming up with innovative solutions. Farmers and ranchers love innovation. Anything that improves efficiency, improves productivity, and more to the point, improves profitability, I guarantee you we will work with them. But when those things start costing the bottom line, it's time to take a good hard look at those standards, particularly if the solutions being offered don't have the science, don't have the proven technologies behind them to operate. Thank you for letting us be part of this, and thank you all for consuming lots of farmer and rancher products in your daily lives.
You notice we have a display of those in the back of the room,
Yes,
right?
ma'am. Thank you very much for that. I was quite impressed.
Well, thank you, Dale, for those remarks.
Yeah, I think we're going to open it up for questions now from the
Yes, feel
From the
free
media.
to raise your hand, shout out your affiliation, or if you're a member of the media for whom you are representing. I think you heard something that really was important for all of us, is we see energy as the solution to America's economic challenges right now, and there are a lot of opportunities to capitalize on that. But we have to keep it affordable and reliable and diverse. And this group, its sole intent is to keep that on the table for the American consumer and the American business community. So we see this as a real opportunity to make an important contribution to a more secure America going forward. So with that, questions? Yes, sir. We do have mics, but it's a small room, so we're happy to repeat the question.
Okay. My name is Ricardo Bird. I'm with the National Association of Neighborhoods. This is a very impressive list of your coalition members, but conspicuously absent are minority organizations, grassroots organizations, advocacy organizations. Recently, the White House asked minority organizations, what is it they want him to say? We had a chance to see some of those lists. Your issues did not even make the list, and that is a tragedy. And it is an indictment that this group needs to reach out and touch minority organizations, because this is critical. This is critical. We used to fence with Carol Bronner, and she would love to take on your lobbyists. I mean, she just enjoyed it. But what she didn't enjoy was when there was a mayor, a county official, a hospital administrator, a farmer, a small business person, and we started talking about the social impacts of those decisions. And she had to back up. So I think if you continue with the group that you have, you'll continue to have the challenges that you have, but you need more non-traditional stakeholders to be a part of this group.
It's an excellent point. This is obviously the launch of the group, and we're welcoming everybody into this group. And I appreciate you bringing that up, because clearly the cost of energy impacts all consumers. We talk as manufacturers about the fact that we use a third of the nation's energy supply, but there are people all over this country that even today struggle to pay their home heating and energy costs. And if we have policies that drive up those costs, it just makes quality of life diminish in this country. And that's not what anybody that I've ever talked to in Congress or who's run for office wants to see.
Jay, if I might, I would add, that's why we are pleased to be part of this. Our members are grassroots members, including a lot of our members are leaders in those local rural communities, and we hope to have a lot more company at the grassroots level on this. That's a very good suggestion.
And we'll count you as a new member.
That's right.
We do have the rural electric cooperatives as a founding member of this, and I would have to say I think all of us would consider ourselves grassroots organizations because we represent, in the aggregate, 3 million businesses across the country. Those are America's job creators, and we're employing people. So we completely agree with you, and we're going to be as broad and deep as time and space and appetite certainly allows. I was remiss in not reminding people that we actually do have a website, www.betterenergyfuture.org, where a lot of our information, you've received some of it in packets as you arrived this morning, but we do have a website, and we are part of the 21st century. We do have a Facebook page and a Twitter handle. So friend us, follow us on Twitter, and sign up on our website. There is a space for the ordinary American to sign up and be part of this, because it is not going to be just led by associations and chambers and manufacturing organizations and all of our members. It's going to be representative of the broadest concerns of American consumers, who ultimately are the ones who pay the price for either bad policy or bad regulation, and they are certainly part of this equation. Other comments?
Hi, my name's Claire Four, and I'm with National Journal. So you talked a bit about how you'll be working to shape the way the rules are written and to have more input from all these organizations that will be affected. But in Congress right now, a lot of the sort of efforts that have been around the rules have been potentially to block them. And I'm wondering if blocking the rules is also something that would be sort of on the table.
Well, I think the answer is we'll block anything that is not in the interest of the American economy. And so the toolbox is broad and deep. There's obviously the legislative angle, either supporting or good legislation that would seek to ameliorate bad policy or bad regulation. There's obviously being part of the regulatory process that already exists, and we will be vigorously participating in the regulatory process. And ultimately, if at the end of the day it doesn't yield an outcome that either collectively or individually we don't feel is representative, there's always the ultimate end game of litigation. And so there's not a tool that is off the table, and each individual will decide how they want to play that. But the opportunity to advance an understanding of what is a good outcome, I think, is what hasn't happened to date. And that's why we are all aligned to help people understand both the negative things that could happen by forcing sources of energy off the table, what could happen to electricity costs, and to look for either legislative relief or better regulation. The administration holds a tremendous amount of the cards right now to do it right. We'd like to help them get it right so that it's inclusive, fair, transparent, and achievable. And if that can't happen, obviously legislation and congressional oversight is needed. And ultimately, if that doesn't work, there's obviously the courts that will be an option individually and collectively to all of us. But
Karen,
I can speak from the Chamber's perspective and the Institute's perspective, but I know others may have other thoughts.
Just to add to that, on the characterization legislation, I think it's notable that there is legislation introduced and pending that doesn't block a rule. It redirects how EPA should be conducting the rulemaking in more historical fashion as in terms of how it sets the standards based on technology that's been demonstrated. So it's not simply a block, it's reminding EPA and redirecting them to the historic way of setting these standards under the Clean Air Act.
The substance, I think, is as important as the process. We want to improve the process so that the substance can be dealt with transparently and cost effectively. Other comments? Yes, sir.
Yeah.
We have these bright lights kept
I don't
on
need
by
that.
affordable electricity, obviously, so we can't see
this
you.
thing on. Steve Hayward, currently University of Colorado and Forbes magazine. A comment more than a question, picking up on something Mr. McCurdy said, although it's for anybody to respond to. Mr. McCurdy, you made the comment that, I think the way you put it was, we don't want to make this an ideological battle, and I understand that point. It makes good sense not to attack a stick of dynamite to these contentious issues and press the plunger. On the other hand, I think it is a mistake to avoid the fact that this issue, and many others, goes beyond just this one, are driven by two things. One, there is deep ideology behind what the EPA is doing. And second, it combines with the bureaucratic imperative always to self-perpetuate the mission of the organization. And so it seems to me that in the fullness of time, if you don't acknowledge those facts and make some kind of intelligent stand about them, then all you're doing is losing more slowly.
I'm not sure I disagree. What I was referring to on ideology, I mean, there's ideology on both sides. And this town is right now paralyzed because of ideology. And, you know, I hate to refer to the old days, but when I was in the Congress and worked on these issues, you were able to pull together effective bipartisan coalitions to effectuate change and to advance policy in a constructive way. But we always had that balance, and it was, you know, keep an eye on the economy. What's the economic benefit here? But also, you know, what are those long-term goals? Whether it was energy security, which we have seen, you know, administrations for 40 years miserably fail, and part of it is also kind of a view of what the role of government is. And government should enable and to set long-term goals, but also provide research and development to support a lot of these technologies that enable us to achieve these goals. And they are there to protect health and the environment. And we certainly share those. And you, I don't know your ideology or philosophy, but I'm one of those ultimate pragmatists. But I would tell you, you know, I believe climate change is real. I've been to both poles. I've stood on the South Pole, and I've been as close to the North Pole as you can get almost. And I think this is significant. I believe we have to move to a lower carbon future. However, you don't put all your eggs in one basket. You don't make these leaps, and you don't make assumptions because, lo and behold, they don't always work out. And one of those is a classic example is what's happened in natural gas. Because of American technology and innovation in a private sector, not because of government, we now have a domestic resource that is a game changer. If you left it to, and government didn't do that, but if you left it to government, and I think Europe is facing that today, they made some leaps of faith, they made assumptions that they now have to live with. I'm a strong believer in the nearly 30 plus years that I've been doing this. In public policy, I was with Sean O'Keefe the other day at one of these meetings, and he's former NASA administrator, and I've dealt with those. I used to chair a NASA subcommittee as well. Everybody wants to have the lunar shot, the moon shot. Let's go to this great new thing. Well, that's important and it's good, but I would tell you, I'm a strong believer in compound interest. If you make smart, incremental decisions that improve and are in the right direction, at the end of the day, they really do add up. And we see this on things like greenhouse gas emissions. We're 1992 levels or below because of some policies we have and the energy mix that we have, and again, a robust private sector that's helping to get there. So when I say these things about confrontation, sure, we know how to win a fight, but you know, we want to prevent the fight, but we also want to lead the solution. So I think that's what coalitions are about. Those are things, and I actually borrowed that from Susan Neely if she's around. You know, but we believe that as an association. You know, and so if we have to have a fight, we'll do that. But let's prevent it. And again, I don't want to dominate this, but you addressed me. When I was at the Alliance of Automobile Manufacturers, I actually engaged this administration on the fuel economy standards on automobiles. We had some challenges out there, but we actually brought the stakeholders together and developed a rule that, you know, the automakers are actually successful at today. But it had to be in a serious negotiation engagement, and no one won perfectly. And I'm not sure we've had the same thing. And my concern as leader in this particular sector of the energy portfolio is how you look at future rules and the precedents set here. We just want to make sure it's done transparently. And again, using and collecting facts as opposed to just, you know, aspirational goals.
Thank you, Dave. Other comments or questions? I think you hit on a very important point, and I'm sure Mike would agree with this, which is the technologically feasible element of this, and to ensure as we go forward that in the rulemaking process that EPA does not put forward technologies that might be available in a laboratory but are not commercially viable or available out in the marketplace. And we're seeing a tendency for them to overly judge the viability of technologies today for coal-fired electricity, which would, if not available, obviously move coal out of the system entirely, or if they are mandated, either will necessarily drive up electricity or we just won't build any. All three of those are probably pretty bad scenarios for the American economy. And if we follow that trajectory, as EPA must in its regulatory process continue to ratchet things down, then ultimately we get to natural gas, and then we get to fertilizer, and we get to the chemical industry, and we get to the farmers, and then we've got an American economy that is not functioning. And that's why we want to be in this at the very beginning, because it is so precedent setting, because years from now we will be regulating things and people that are not at this table, and we need to make sure that that table is set so that their issues can be addressed in a technologically viable way, in an inclusive way, and an economically viable way, so that we can be competitive, because our competitors all around the world are not getting less competitive, they're getting more competitive, and we need to be able to use energy to our advantage today, because that's one of the principal ones we have on the table, which is why we have such a diverse set of interests coming together to defend that opportunity.
Karen, it seems like it's a rush to a conclusion that's already been made as opposed to judgment. And we're asking for the process to be looked at very transparently and to make sure that everyone has a say and to slow it down a little bit. The fact that we have 16 different kinds of clean coal technology that's on power plants today. I've been to plants that haven't been scrubbed. I was on a utility board, and I've been to plants that are scrubbed. There's a huge difference, and that technology didn't all happen at one time. And it's got to be proven over a period of time. And carbon sequestration, I believe, will work. It will work in some circumstances better than others, but it's not the only thing going on. The governor of Colorado is starting new research. Ohio State University, working with algae, has new research. ARPA-E has all kinds of projects that are out there. Incrementally, over a 40-year period, we've made huge progress in cleaning the air up in this country, and we can continue doing that. Give us a chance. Don't just ban this by saying it has to be one particular technology.
I'm going to give you one last opportunity out there. Comments, complaints? Hopefully no complaints.
Let me just offer a final point on competitiveness that you addressed a moment ago, Karen. We measure from a manufacturing perspective the cost of doing business in the United States versus our major trading partners. And there are several inputs that go into the calculation: taxes, regulation, energy, tort costs. And our latest number shows that it's 20% more expensive to manufacture in the United States than it is anywhere else in the world. And that's after you take out the cost of labor. The only area in which, for the first time since we began this study, where we have a slight cost advantage is energy. And to your earlier point about investments being made here in the United States, jobs being created here in the United States, energy costs have been a significant driver of that. Our goal is, certainly from the manufacturing perspective, is to drive that overall cost of business down even as far as we possibly can to attract even more investment. And affordable and reliable energy supply is really key to that. So thank you all very much for being a part of this, coalition and this partnership. We've got a lot of work to do, but together, clearly, we can make some pretty big inroads by all of our collective voices. So thanks for being here.
Well, hearing no other comments, thank you for being here. Follow us on the web, Facebook, Twitter, and on your way out, you can also receive a copy of our new energy platform, which you'll find at the exits. Thank you all very much.
So it's a very personal thing for me.
Well, I'm originally from Wyoming, so I work for Senator Thomas, and so I know all about coal.
Yeah.
love coal. Railroads, maybe not so much. Coal's all good.
Well, I represent the railroads too, as you know.